London, 1815. The city glimmered beneath gaslight and candle flame, a theatre of silk and ambition where the slightest whisper could crown or condemn a soul. To belong to London's Ton was to live within a gilded cage, its bars forged of etiquette and expectation. Among those who danced within it was Lady Eleanor Ashcombe, 22, daughter of Viscount Ashcombe of Hertfordshire. Her beauty was spoken of as one speaks of fragile porcelain, something to be admired, never touched. Her fortune was modest, her manners flawless, her every step measured beneath the gaze of a society eager to find fault. For 2 seasons she had been courted by Lord Henry Pembroke, heir to the Earl of Worthing, a man of striking charm and carefully rehearsed virtue. He possessed the easy smile of one accustomed to applause and the cold heart of one who sought only advancement. To Eleanor, he had seemed the embodiment of stability, handsome, intelligent, secure in lineage. She had allowed herself to believe, as young women must, that affection could flourish where duty first took root. Her mother had wept with relief at the match. Her father, a man of debts and fading influence, had thanked Providence for so honorable a union. The evening of their triumph was to be the pinnacle of her young life. Almack's assembly rooms, the sanctum of London's elite, were ablaze with light, every chandelier dripping with crystals that refracted the golden glow of 500 candles. Perfumed air hung thick with conversation and the delicate rustle of silk. Here the future of every young lady was bartered in smiles and minuets. Eleanor entered upon her father's arm, her gown a pale blue satin that caught the light like water. Around her, fans fluttered, and whispers followed. She had become, for the first time, an object of admiration. Lord Pembroke arrived late, as men of self-importance often did. His dark hair was arranged with meticulous care, his cravat tied in the elaborate style of a man who sought to be noticed. Eleanor's heart lifted when she saw him across the room, but something within his expression halted her breath. His eyes met hers not with warmth, but with the cool detachment of a man rehearsing his next line. When the music slowed, he approached. The murmur of voices softened. "Lady Eleanor," he said, bowing with perfect grace, "might I have a word?" She smiled, an innocent, hopeful gesture, and followed him toward the center of the ballroom. The crowd, sensing something unscripted, drew subtly nearer. At Almack's, nothing drew attention faster than impropriety. "Henry," she whispered, "is something the matter?" He did not answer at once. Then, with deliberate calm, he spoke loudly enough for those nearby to hear. "It is only proper that I make this known before misunderstandings arise. Our engagement, though once mutually agreeable, cannot proceed." The words fell like glass shattering on marble. Eleanor's face drained of color. Around them, fans stilled in midair. "Cannot proceed," she managed, her voice trembling. "I have been made aware," he continued, "of certain indiscretions. Your conduct with gentlemen of questionable repute has been the subject of unfortunate discussion. I cannot, in good conscience, bind my family to such rumors." Gasps rippled through the assembly. The orchestra faltered, bows quivering in the air. Eleanor's throat closed. "That is false," she whispered, unable to raise her voice. He inclined his head, the gesture of a man wounded by duty. "I wish you well, Lady Eleanor." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the tide of whispers began, soft, poisonous, unstoppable. The crowd's attention turned inward, hungry for scandal. Her father's face blazed crimson, her mother's fan trembled in her grasp. Eleanor stood motionless, her dignity the last fragile armor she possessed. The man she had trusted, the future she had envisioned, all dissolved beneath the pitiless gaze of the Ton. From the edge of the room, a figure stirred. The Duke of Wickliffe, William Ashford, watched the unfolding spectacle with the stillness of a man long practiced in observing cruelty. At 30, he was already a legend, soldier, strategist, survivor of Waterloo. His title commanded fear, his silence commanded more. He was tall, dark-haired, with eyes the color of slate and a bearing shaped by both privilege and war. London called him the Iron Duke, not for politics, but for temperament. No woman of ambition had ever breached the fortress of his reserve. Yet, as he watched Eleanor's composure falter beneath the weight of public disgrace, something unfamiliar stirred within him. It was not pity. It was recognition, the raw, human ache of witnessing injustice in a room too polite to name it. He crossed the ballroom without ceremony, each step drawing a hush. When he reached her, he inclined his head with the faintest bow. "Lady Eleanor," he said quietly, his voice low but carrying. "Forgive my intrusion. May I have the honor of this next dance?" The words struck the crowd like a bell. Pembroke's composure flickered. Whispers turned into incredulous murmurs. Eleanor blinked, unable to trust her own hearing. "Your Grace, Please," he said softly, offering his hand. "Allow me." To refuse would have been an acknowledgment of ruin. To accept was to defy it. She placed her trembling fingers upon his gloved palm. The orchestra, uncertain, began to play again. The Duke guided her into the waltz, a dance still considered daring by the old guard, where partners met face to face. Every turn of the floor seemed to rewrite her fate. Where moments before she had stood alone in disgrace, she now moved in the arms of the most powerful man in England. Conversation hushed, admiration warred with shock. The Duke's expression remained unreadable, his movements precise, his voice nearly a whisper. "You will not bow to them," he said. "They are cowards behind chandeliers." Her eyes burned. "Why would you?" "Because I cannot abide cruelty dressed in etiquette." The music slowed. When the final note faded, he bowed and led her back to her father with a soldier's dignity. "My lord," he said to Viscount Ashcombe, "your daughter is under my protection this evening. No one shall speak against her name in my presence." The morning after Almack's, London whispered relentlessly. Every carriage, every drawing-room, seemed to carry fragments of Eleanor Ashcombe's public humiliation, each repetition sharpening the sting of disgrace. Even in the confines of her family home, she felt the weight of invisible eyes, scrutinizing her every gesture, every word. Her mother fretted, fretting not only for Eleanor's reputation but for the ruin it might bring to the Ashcombe name. Her father moved about in a haze of irritation and worry, pacing the wood-paneled corridors of their townhome as though restlessness could shield them from societal censure. Eleanor herself, though aching with embarrassment and anger, refused to yield entirely to despair. She understood, in that quiet morning, that dignity was all she possessed, and it would be her most powerful shield. Meanwhile, the Duke of Wickliffe retreated to his London residence, a house of sober grandeur near Grosvenor Square. It was filled with artifacts from campaigns abroad, portraits of fallen comrades, and the austere weight of memory. A man of few words, he rarely intervened in society's trivialities. Yet Eleanor's humiliation lingered in his mind, persistent as the echo of a drum on the battlefield. He was a man shaped by war, accustomed to reading threats and intentions in silence, and he discerned the cruelty in Lord Pembroke's act as clearly as a battlefield stratagem. Something stirred in him, perhaps the first flicker of admiration for a woman whose virtue had been imperiled, yet whose composure remained unbroken. Eleanor's life over the next weeks became a careful dance between isolation and cautious social engagement. Invitations to balls and teas, once the currency of her world, had vanished. Mothers with ambitious daughters avoided her gaze. Acquaintances whispered behind feigned hands. She spent hours in reflection, walking the gardens of Ashcombe Estate, reading by the fire, and writing letters she dared not send. The Tun demanded not only beauty but perfection in conduct, and she had been shown to falter, even unjustly. Yet her spirit remained intact, tempered by a subtle defiance. She would not submit entirely to the cruel narrative imposed by others. Letters arrived from the Duke, short, restrained, yet infused with intent. At first, Eleanor approached them cautiously, unsure whether they were gestures of sympathy or silent judgments. Each message, however, revealed a mind attentive to nuance, a man accustomed to command, yet willing to wield his influence delicately on her behalf. He praised her fortitude, acknowledged the injustice she suffered, and expressed a desire to see her preserved from further social harm. In his words, Eleanor sensed an understanding of her inner turmoil, a recognition that surpassed mere politeness. The Duke did not attempt to flatter with empty words. He did not offer comfort for comfort's sake. He offered respect, and with it, an unfamiliar sense of safety. As winter deepened, Eleanor traveled to Bath at the suggestion of an aunt, seeking respite from the suffocating scrutiny of London. The city, with its elegant crescents and warm mineral waters, offered a temporary reprieve. Here, the Tun gathered for promenades and concerts, yet the pace allowed her moments of introspection. She observed the subtle ways society measured and dismissed women, noting how appearances and rumor could dictate fates more surely than wealth or intelligence. In this reflective solitude, her mind returned often to the Duke. She wondered why a man of his renown and temperament would intervene for her, a woman of comparatively modest means. The Duke, in turn, navigated the treacherous currents of London society with purpose. Known for his cold reserve, his very name commanded reverence. Yet whispers followed his every action. Why does he concern himself with Lady Eleanor? Is he seeking amusement or something more scandalous? These murmurs, though vexing to his peers, mattered little to him. He did not seek approval. He sought justice in the small, precise form that society rarely afforded women. Each step he took to safeguard Eleanor's honor was calculated, yet beneath his measured actions, a more personal consideration began to emerge, a quiet fascination with her courage, her wit, her refusal to bow beneath humiliation. Their correspondence grew, moving from formal notes to exchanges that hinted at mutual understanding. Eleanor's replies became more candid, her fear gradually giving way to curiosity. She sensed in the Duke a man burdened by experience, his comportment shaped by both privilege and trauma. He had survived wars, witnessed the death of comrades, and endured the expectations of an unyielding aristocracy. Yet in his letters, she discerned moments of vulnerability, subtle admissions of loneliness, of grief, and of admiration for a spirit undiminished by slander. Their dialogue, restrained yet intimate, formed a bridge over the chasm of scandal and speculation, a conduit through which mutual respect transformed into cautious affection. In Bath, Eleanor attended concerts and promenade gatherings with a careful eye on propriety. Each social encounter reminded her of the precariousness of her position, and yet she moved with deliberate grace. She observed mothers maneuvering their daughters into advantageous positions, gentlemen offering polite but calculated glances. She recognized the power of observation, of subtle influence, and she began to measure her own presence against it. Her beauty was still admired, but it was her composure, her restraint, and her refusal to indulge in gossip that distinguished her. Those who had once deemed her vulnerable now found themselves reconsidering her worth. Despite the distance, the Duke remained a quiet presence in her life. He occasionally appeared in London, always within social bounds, offering subtle interventions, an approving word here, a shield from rumor there. His reputation as a war hero and man of integrity lent credibility to Eleanor's renewed standing. Society began to murmur not with contempt, but with curiosity. What was the nature of their connection? Why would a man of such power engage with a woman of modest fortune? Eleanor herself struggled to comprehend the depth of his attention, yet she found solace in the constancy it provided. In him, she recognized an ally in a world governed by appearance, and slowly, admiration began to seat itself alongside gratitude. Winter waned, and Eleanor received an unexpected invitation to Wickliffe Manor. It was neither a summons nor a command, but a polite suggestion framed in his careful handwriting. The estate, located in the rolling hills of Yorkshire, was known for its austere beauty. Stone halls, expansive gardens, and a library lined with books chronicling history and strategy alike. Eleanor understood the implications. An invitation from a duke carried both opportunity and risk. It was a chance to demonstrate grace, intelligence, and dignity under his scrutiny, and perhaps to reclaim some measure of autonomy in the eyes of society. The journey north was contemplative. Eleanor traveled by carriage through frost-tipped countryside, reflecting on the path that had led her here. She thought of the evening at Almack's, the cruel words of Pembroke, the sharp intake of breath from the Tun, and the steady hand of the Duke that had guided her through the dance. She considered her own resilience, her desire not merely to survive, but to live with integrity. By the time she arrived at Wickliffe Manor, she had resolved to meet the winter with composure, and perhaps to confront the stirring of feelings she scarcely understood. The Duke awaited her in the entrance hall, a figure as imposing as the estate itself. His demeanor remained reserved, yet his gaze held a measure of warmth previously unseen. He led her through the great rooms, allowing Eleanor glimpses of his life and the causes to which he devoted himself, veterans returning from war, charitable endeavors, and the quiet administration of an estate that had been his responsibility since youth. Each step revealed not only his power but the depth of his character, a blend of duty, compassion, and understated pride. That evening, as Eleanor dined in a softly lit room with the Duke, she recognized a subtle shift. The conversation, initially formal, allowed small openings for personal revelation. He inquired after her thoughts, her experiences, and her reflections on the society that had so swiftly judged her. Eleanor, in turn, shared insights tempered by caution but imbued with honesty. There was no need for artifice. The walls of propriety were present, yet behind them emerged a dialogue of mutual recognition. By nightfall, Eleanor understood that this courtship, unlike any she had anticipated, would demand more than beauty or compliance. It required thought, courage, and measured discretion. And yet, within this challenge lay a promise, that the reputation stripped from her could, in time, be reclaimed, not merely through social maneuvering but through the quiet power of character and the growing regard of a man whose judgment she had come to trust. As the fire flickered and snow fell softly against the windows of Wickliffe Manor, Eleanor realized that a new chapter had begun, one in which scandal no longer dictated the boundaries of her heart, and where the possibility of love, unexpected and profound, lingered just beyond the reach of fear. Winter had softened into early spring when Eleanor Ashcombe settled into the rhythm of life at Wickliffe Manor. The estate, a vast expanse of stone and rolling gardens, seemed to mirror the Duke himself, formidable at first glance, yet beneath its austere exterior lay warmth and careful stewardship. Eleanor walked the corridors with a newfound confidence, aware that her presence was no longer defined by scandal but by the quiet acknowledgment of her character. The Duke, ever precise in his movements and words, observed her with a steady intensity, revealing little yet suggesting more through small gestures. The courteous offer of a favorite book, the attentive question after a long journey, the subtle encouragement in conversation. In these moments, Eleanor began to see the man behind the title, the man who had saved her reputation not out of obligation, but because he recognized her worth. Society, predictably, had not remained idle. Rumors of their connection reached London with the speed and subtlety of wildfire. Some whispered of impropriety. Others marveled at the audacity of the Duke's interest in a woman recently so cruelly shunned. Eleanor paid these murmurs little heed, though the weight of their gaze was not entirely lost on her. She understood the power she now wielded, not merely the ability to reclaim her social standing, but to influence perception with grace and restraint. Each measured smile, each deliberate display of composure, furthered her quiet redemption. Yet even as she regained footing in the social world, the bond between her and the Duke deepened, moving beyond formalities into a shared understanding shaped by mutual respect and unspoken affection. One afternoon, as she explored the estate's extensive library, Eleanor came upon a portrait of the Duke's younger brother, a man lost to the wars of Europe. In the stillness of the room, Eleanor finally comprehended the magnitude of the Duke's inner life. He had survived battles that had claimed others, navigated the rigid expectations of aristocracy, and shouldered responsibilities beyond measure. His reticence, his measured caution, and his meticulous sense of duty were not merely affectations. They were the armor of a man who had endured far more than any whispered scandal. Eleanor's heart swelled with both compassion and admiration. She realized that the care he extended to her was not simply protective, but an invitation, to be trusted, to be seen fully, without pretense or judgment. It was during one such visit that Lord Pembroke made his ill-considered return to the narrative of Eleanor's life. He arrived under the guise of reconciliation, his manner polished but his intent unmistakable. Pembroke's presence stirred unease among the household, yet Eleanor met him with composed firmness. The Duke, always silent until necessary, stepped forward when Pembroke attempted to cast doubt upon Eleanor's honor once more. "Your claims are unfounded," he declared, voice steady, resonating through the hall. "Lady Eleanor's virtue is beyond question, and her conduct throughout this matter has been exemplary." The assertion, though simple, carried the weight of the Duke's authority, leaving Pembroke no avenue for further manipulation. Eleanor felt a surge of relief and gratitude, tempered by an acute awareness of the fragile intersection between justice and reputation in her world. The confrontation resolved, life at Wickliffe Manor resumed its deliberate rhythm. Eleanor discovered a new freedom in this environment, one defined not by fear of judgment but by the possibility of authentic expression. She engaged with the estate's charitable endeavors, learning of the Duke's meticulous attention to the welfare of his tenants, the support extended to veterans, and the careful management of his lands. These observations revealed a man whose influence extended far beyond the ballroom or drawing room, a man committed to the well-being of others, disciplined in thought and action, and tempered by experience. Eleanor's admiration deepened, not only for the honor he upheld but for the kindness and integrity he manifested in private, away from the scrutiny of society. Their evenings together grew in intimacy, though never unmeasured. Fireside conversations revealed shared values, insights into human character, and reflections on the delicate balance between duty and desire. Eleanor found herself confiding, cautiously at first, in the Duke regarding her fears, her hopes, and her growing sense of purpose. He listened without interruption, offering perspectives shaped by both wisdom and experience, never dismissive, never intrusive. In these exchanges, a subtle but profound affection took root, its growth nurtured by mutual respect, intellectual engagement, and the quiet recognition of shared resilience. The Duke's guarded nature softened, imperceptibly but unmistakably, revealing the man Eleanor had glimpsed from the very first evening at Almack's, capable of passion tempered by discretion, of judgment balanced with empathy. Spring advanced, bringing with it longer days and the tentative promise of renewal. Eleanor, now acclimated to both the estate and the Duke's presence, reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. The humiliation she had suffered seemed distant, refracted through the lens of experience and understanding. She no longer perceived the world solely as a theater of judgment, but as a place in which courage, intelligence, and integrity could carve enduring influence. Her confidence was not born of defiance alone, but of the recognition that character, once proven, commanded respect even in a society obsessed with appearance. It was on a morning suffused with soft sunlight that the Duke led Eleanor to the estate gardens, a place where the budding roses and tender shoots of spring reflected both natural beauty and the potential for growth in life and heart. There, amidst the quiet serenity of nature, he spoke with a clarity and vulnerability rare for a man of his station. "Lady Eleanor," he said, "you have endured much with dignity. You have shown courage where others faltered and integrity where it might have been easier to yield. I cannot ignore the regard I feel, nor the hope that we might walk a path together, not as title and ward, but as equals in purpose and in heart." Eleanor, her pulse quickened yet tempered by composure, met his gaze. The depth of feeling in his expression was unmistakable, tempered by the careful restraint that had always defined him. She recognized in it not only affection, but the acknowledgment of shared trials and the promise of partnership built on trust and respect. In that moment, the complexities of societal expectation, scandal, and propriety seemed to dissolve, leaving only two people poised on the cusp of a union defined by both admiration and understanding. The ensuing weeks were devoted to planning, not merely for ceremony, but for the careful orchestration of social perception. Invitations were sent, carefully worded, to the appropriate houses in London and Bath. Rumors of impropriety were countered by the deliberate visibility of their engagement, charitable events, public promenades, and discreet social gatherings designed to reinforce Eleanor's renewed standing. The Duke's influence, combined with Eleanor's poise, gradually silenced detractors. Each measured act, each visible display of propriety and grace, reinforced a narrative they had carefully constructed, one in which love and honor could coexist, and in which scandal could be replaced by admiration. Finally, the day of their wedding arrived at St. George's, Hanover Square. The ceremony, while brief, was suffused with dignity and quiet grandeur. The Duke stood as a figure of strength and unwavering regard, Eleanor as a woman who had endured and emerged with her character unshaken. The congregation witnessed not only the union of two individuals but the culmination of trials endured with courage, restraint, and understanding. In their joining, the narrative of scandal and humiliation gave way to one of triumph and authentic affection. As the couple left the church, the sun glinting on polished carriages and marble steps, Eleanor felt a profound sense of completion. The world, while still observant and often intrusive, no longer dictated the boundaries of her life or heart. The Duke's hand in hers was not merely a symbol of social restoration, but of mutual respect, admiration, and the promise of shared life. In this union, both found redemption, Eleanor in the reclamation of her dignity, and the Duke in the quiet joy of love that transcended the rigid expectations of society. Their story, though beginning in scandal, concluded in affirmation, an enduring testament to resilience, integrity, and the transformative power of genuine connection.